Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking about crisis communications with Sean Mallen. Sean, great first segment there. Some great information. I'd like to talk about the messaging. And my first question is, when should we start communicating? Do we wait till we have all the facts? Do we just blurt something out? And what should we say as well?
The essence of crisis communications is rapid response. But you, of course, don't just blurt something out because poor choice of words can make matters worse. But we talked in the first segment about how social media can take things over so quickly, and falsehoods can be spread so quickly. So now, more than even before social media, you needed to be able to respond quickly. Back in the days when it was just radio, TV, newspapers. But you need to respond quickly because the bad information can get out quickly. So that's why most organizations, public-facing organizations, need to have a crisis communications plan. So think airlines, think railroads, think utilities, think municipalities, for example, who might have to deal with unexpected disasters, accidents, that kind of thing. They all have crisis communications plans, and it gives them a template of how to respond. They think about when we write them. I tell organizations, okay, think about the worst thing that could possibly happen to you and go there. So airline, plane crash, obviously, or a strike that shuts people down, or a weather event that disrupts people's travel. And more in recent years, it's also been a Me Too kind of situations that lead to reputational challenges for the leadership. So you need to have a template of responses and how quickly you respond to them. So plane crash, for example, you're probably not going to know that much right off the bat, but you want to get something out, even a thin bit of information that you'd probably post on social media, and you'd probably send out an old-fashioned news release to traditional news organizations. And it simply says what you know at that point. And it may be plane's gone missing over whatever area it is. We're doing everything we can to find out what happened with it. It might just be that. And we promise that we'll be forthcoming with whatever information we have and get it to you as quickly as possible. Because, of course, people are desperate, your family member, friends on the flight. They need to know what you know as quickly as possible. And again, it's all guided back by these three main tenets that I spoke about earlier: empathy, transparency, responsibility, which should guide it. So the answer is you respond quickly, and with whatever you know. You have thought in advance the kind of template responses that are messaging that you'd use to ensure you hit the right tone. You don't want to downplay it. You want to be accurately representing the nature of the event and however traumatic or tragic the event might be. And then if it's an ongoing event, hurricane's a good example, or a major power outage like that, you'll have a plan for how to speak at different times when you know more and when you can get more information out. So you've got a plan to roll that out. And in case of airlines or railroads, for example, they have crisis plans that give different gradations of the severity of the event. If it's a minor delay, you might not even respond. If it's sort of a medium kind of thing, where a plane's delayed 2 hours or something like that, or there's some kind of incident that has delayed something, okay, maybe you'll put out a statement and you'll express regrets that it happened. Saying sorry is always a very helpful part of a crisis plan. And if it's the ultimate bad news that there's been a major crash and loss of life, then you get the most senior people involved, and you arrange major events to inform people the best you can. And as part of it, you're making every effort you can to inform the people most affected by it as quickly and truthfully as possible.
As one person put it to me, you have to acknowledge that something has happened, right?
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
ignore it.
Yeah. You can't hide under your desk. That's the worst thing you can do. And believe me, the kind of entities we've spoken about, utilities, airlines, railroads, they know this. They know they have to respond. There are occasional incidents when they may have fumbled the issue. Think a few years ago, it was a major American airline I'm thinking it was United. If it wasn't United, I'm sorry, where they had that incident where a guy was pulled off a plane, kicking and screaming somewhere in the United States because he'd been bumped from the flight and he didn't want to get off. And he was bloodied in the process. And of course, somebody caught it on a phone, their camera, they captured the video of it. And of course, it became viral. And the airline in question was a little bit slow to respond, full up on that, and suffered a day or two of really nasty reputational damage. There's some thought that behind the scenes, the staff may have felt that this guy was being unreasonable or was deliberately making a scene. So they didn't like the guy that much and felt he wasn't a very sympathetic character. But that didn't matter because the video was of a guy being dragged, kicking and screaming off a flight that he was bumped. And any airline, you're just not going to look good at that. You're not. You're not going to be. The sympathies will never be with you. So they suffered a bit in that example by waiting and finally doing what they ultimately had to do, which was say they were sorry.
Is Why is it so difficult to say that?
Because sometimes you think you're in the right, or sometimes you're in that case. I mean, I don't know, but the behind the scenes stories indicated that the staff felt the guy was not being reasonable and that he was making this worse, deliberately making this worse. But so sometimes you think you're in the right, but you have to step back a bit. And sometimes this is why this is the space I work in. If you bring in an independent consultant who specializes in crisis communications, they can tell you hard truths that maybe the internal communications person can't, which is to say, you can look at the boss and say, yeah, okay, this person who's getting on social media who's making you look bad, okay, I understand. You think this guy was a jerk, but that doesn't matter. I'm sorry. You're getting pounded on this. And you just need to accept that much as you might dislike this, you're just going to have to say you're sorry.
Yeah. There's
And
something else that I was told that we shouldn't say. Oh, but yet you still hear it, and that's no comment. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, I advise people to never use the words no comment. There are times when you can't speak about a subject. You know, maybe it's an internal HR issue, or maybe there's some sort of confidentiality involved, or something's before the courts. And if that's the case, you don't say no comment. You simply say, I'm sorry for this reason. I can't really speak on that. So because no comment always sounds evasive. So no comment always sounds like you've got something to hide.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I think even when in daily conversation, when you say someone says no comment, is like, oh yeah, okay, right off the bat, okay, there's something you don't want to tell me.
Mhm.
But then I guess that if you do say that too, that also leads to more rumor and conjecture out there
Yeah.
on social media and more things, more fires to fight.
Yeah, it's exactly that. You have to say what you can say. You need to ultimately you need to try to tell your story the best you can. Now there are some examples. I mean, I'm an ex-reporter. My instinct with clients is always to say engage as best you can. Engage with the news media to tell your story. Sometimes that's in the form of an on-camera interview, but sometimes it can be a no-win situation.
Mm.
And maybe you just have to go with putting out a statement, putting it the best statement you can, and leaving it at that. Or sometimes, rarely, very rarely, maybe stay silent. And the only example I can think of that was Prince Andrew's infamous interview with BBC Newsnight a few years ago, which has now produced not one but two movies about what a crisis disaster it was. And my understanding was that his communication advisor quit before he did it because he knew it was going to be a disaster, which it was going to be, because his his advisor would have known that Prince Andrew would have come across as an unsympathetic character who was not going to show any empathy for the women who were hurt in this incident, in this series of incidents in his behavior with Jeffrey Epstein. And the whole thing just became, he was such an unsympathetic character. It was such a complete car crash that he ruined his already tainted reputation and was basically fired by his mother
Yeah.
from all royal activities as well. But that's a rare one. There's sometimes if you know that okay, it is just bad. So the best you can do is put out a statement with the best available comment that you can give, and hope that they'll go with that. But always, generally speaking, you want to engage.
What about laying blame right off the bat? Is that some sort of a tactic to deflect, or what are the pros and cons of laying blame? If there
Again,
are any pros and cons.
it depends. More often than not, remember I said empathy, transparency, responsibility. Accepting the responsibility, whatever level it might be on your part, uh, is more often the better approach. Blaming somebody else doesn't give you any sympathy. There's a case study that I use when I do crisis communications talks. This is well known by everybody who works in the field. In 2008, Maple Leaf Foods here in Canada had a horrible situation with people who died from eating some of their products. They'd been contaminated with listeria at a meat packing plant here in Toronto. And what could be worse for a meat packing company than to sell products that killed people? So there was an intense conversation behind the scenes with the lawyers on one side talking about the dangers of liability and lawsuits and the rest of it, and the communications people on the other side saying you could lose the company. There's nothing worse. You could literally lose the company over this. And the head of the company, Michael McCain, chose to listen to the communications people and was very public, very open in speaking to the news media, and did not try to deflect blame. The exact opposite. And here's where the messaging has to be very carefully crafted. He would say, and I play clips of his public statements in my crisis communications sessions. He would use words like, "This is not on the regulators. This is not on anybody else. This is on us." And it's a very careful line he had to straddle, which he did very well. We place food safety at the highest priority here. But with this incident, something went wrong, and that's on us. And we're going to do everything we can to fix it. So in the weeks and months after that, Maple Leaf Foods became very public advocates for food safety. And to my knowledge, they never found the exact source of the contamination in that plant, meatpacking plant. But my understanding is that they totally retrofitted the plant, took all the machinery out, brought in all new machinery, cost them millions, but made sure everybody knew it, that they were taking this seriously and doing everything they could to protect consumers. And yes, there were some lawsuits that were settled. People, of course, had a right to sue given what had happened and to get settlements. But within 2 years, they'd recovered more than 90% of their meat business. So that's a case study example of approaching an existential crisis communications crisis threat and a communications threat, approaching it with empathy, transparency, and responsibility. Because he continually said, "We've let you down. I'm sorry." He was transparent. "We're going to tell you what we're going to do." And he was. And he accepted responsibility. He didn't try to deflect responsibility on that. And it's a great case study that I and other crisis communication specialists use all the time to cite as a good textbook example of how to respond to this kind of challenge.
I've used that example as well. And I remember seeing him in a commercial on television doing that. And by then I'd been in business continuity management for about 12 years, and my jaw dropped. Well, my God, I've never heard anyone say those words before.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it
And
actually made me want to support them. Like, wow.
right. He didn't deflect it. He gained respect. He
Yeah.
gained respect. And of course, people were hurt. You know, the people, if you lost a loved one, it might be cold comfort, but for the general public, you gain respect because he's not trying to dodge it.
Can you quickly think of anyone who did the opposite, or a company that did the opposite?
Donald Trump on a daily basis. I'll get you some more Trump hate mail. Who will never admit anything's wrong. But he's as they say, a black swan event. He is someone unlike anybody in recent political history because it never seems to hurt him. And so he's able to be a completely viable candidate for president again and might win.
Well, on that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We're talking about crisis communications today with Sean Mallen, and we will be right back. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.